Having car problems? Well, with Rhoda, getting them fixed is as easy as ordering takeout. They'll come pick up your car for free, do any repair or maintenance needed, and return it right to your driveway. They'll even give you a complimentary video inspection of your car so you can see what needs to be done. Perfect for those of us that maybe aren't so car savvy. Book your appointment online at roda.com. And lucky for you, CityCast listeners get a 20% discount on any service for up to $100 off. Just use the code CityCast20. Today on CityCast DC, big changes are coming for how the city deals with animals. Starting in January, DC Health and the Humane Rescue Alliance, which handles animal services, will end a contractual partnership that dates all the way back to 1980. Now, HRA leaders say they were initially caught off guard by this split. The Washington Post's Michael Brice-Saddler explains what this could mean for pets and pet owners in DC. Today's Tuesday, September 17th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. So, Michael, why exactly did DC decide to cut the Humane Rescue Alliance loose?
Well, cut is kind of a strong word. This was something of a mutual separation in the sense that both the Humane Rescue Alliance and DC had their contract up for renewal this month. It's actually been extended until the end of the year, but after that, we're going to see what will happen. But truthfully, this has been an ongoing dispute for close to a year now as far as this contract between the two, which dates back to 1980. It's a really long-standing partnership. Humane Rescue Alliance manages a lot of the animal control and care services that the city provides. But there has been a lot of contention over how much money the volunteers are getting paid, how much money HRA is getting through the contract. They have said they've needed to supplement what the city gives them through private funding because it's not enough to perform these services. So toward the end of last year, they started to say, hey, we need to take another look at the way this contract is structured. It hasn't been meaningfully changed since 2003. The landscape has changed as far as animals and adoption services in the city. And to do this right, to do the work we want to do as a nonprofit, we need to just look at this a little bit differently and maybe recalibrate some of the services that we've been offering or think about how to do it differently. And DC said, that's fine. They've been talking about it. But as the months went on, DC started to say, well, if we're going to be looking at this wholesale, maybe we should just bid out some of the services that HRA has been doing for years and years and years. So that's the plan right now. The DC government is going to solicit new contracts for the services HRA has been doing. Granted, HRA can apply for those contracts, but it's unclear if they will. So that's kind of where things stand. It's a big mess.
So I was reading where an HRA leader was talking about being really shocked by this announcement. It does kind of feel like this was handled abruptly, even though it might have been mutual on both sides.
Yeah, that is something that's still not completely clear to me. DC, on its end, says it signaled that this was coming toward the end of last year when HRA communicated that they wanted to reassess the contract and didn't want things to continue status quo as far as the way this relationship has gone. And DC says that when HRA signaled that around December, they immediately started taking steps to think, okay, well, maybe we should bring some of these services in-house to be handled by the government. For example, the handling of dangerous dogs. Immediately, DC said, we're going to budget some positions in our health department to take on that responsibility because the Humane Rescue Alliance has indicated they don't want to do that anymore or they want to look at that differently. And once that started, DC just said, well, maybe we'll just reassess everything and contract services out that we can't handle in-house.
So you mentioned things like the handling of dangerous dogs. I fully did not know the full breadth of everything HRA does. Like, it doesn't just run animal shelters. What are some of the other animal services that it's handling right now for the city?
Yeah, so the HRA runs the shelter on New York Avenue. It is owned by the city, but HRA manages it, and that will no longer continue starting in January, and it's unclear what exactly will happen. HRA, you mentioned the adoption services, but also investigations related to animal bites. What else? The provision of veterinary services for shelter animals, reports of dangerous and wild animals, rabies investigations, stray dogs, stray cats, wild animals that are out of control. HRA are the folks to call for all of these things. And then there's a very unique responsibility that the HRA has, which is mandated by a congressional charter. It's actually the only humane society that has this charter, but they are responsible for protecting the welfare of children and animals in DC. So they have a law enforcement division. This is the Humane Rescue Alliance that investigates reports of animal cruelty. Those can actually be escalated to the U.S. Attorney for DC's office for potential prosecution. That role is not going to change even with this contract dispute, but everything else is a little bit up in the air.
David, thanks for chatting with me. So, you and I both have cars in the DC metro area, and sometimes they're great, but sometimes they can be a hassle. And I heard you had car issues, man.
Yes, my car, like me, is old and falling apart. And so I wanted to get it fixed. But one of the truly unpleasant tasks I find in the world is getting your car fixed, because you have to take it usually somewhere extremely distant, extremely inconvenient, arrange some alternate form of transportation. And so I heard about Rota.com, and I went on the Rota.com website. And they will come and pick your car up, take it from you, and then do the work and bring it back to you. And so I made an appointment on Rota, which was easy as pie, beautiful user interface, for the work that I wanted done. The valet showed up at around 10 o'clock at my house, as exactly on time. Very easy, just handed him my keys. He drove off with my car. About an hour later, April called me. She said, here are some things that we found with your car in addition to what you want to do. She sent me videos that Michael...
Wait, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm not a car nerd, so I want to know the nitty gritty of what's happening, because I don't know stuff.
1,000,000%. They sent me this video. There was a particular belt that had broken, and they sent me a video of it. And they sent me a list of sort of, here are the things that were recommended. Here are the things that seemed urgent to fix. And I could choose what I wanted to fix and sent that back to them, which took me 3 minutes. Michael, the technician, fixed it. They then texted me and said, oh, your car's on the way back. My car was back in front of my house at 2:30. I'd given it to them at 10. It was back in front of my house that afternoon. Also, note, the valet did a much better job parking in front of my house than I do.
Don't they always?
So much closer to the curb. And it was an incredibly pleasant, super easy experience. And they were very trustworthy. They were clear about what they were going to fix. And it was incredibly convenient.
Yeah, so this seems like a dream. I have used them before, but it's been a bit. Would you use them again for something like this?
I would use Rota again in a second. I would use
Rota.
And they have a discount for us, too, for CityCast listeners. So if you go to Rota.com, they have the discount code CityCast20, and you get 20% off.
Sweet. Plots, David, thank you so much for talking with me. Again, CityCast listeners, you get 20% off any Rota service, up to $100, using the code CityCast20. So go to Rota.com, that's Roda.com, to book your appointment.
So lately, the weather in DC has been downright wacky sometimes. Tornadoes, crazy flooding, bad air quality, so much of it feels out of control. But I recently learned that September is National Preparedness Month, and it is a good reminder to make your emergency plan if you haven't yet. The yearly preparedness campaign was started by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and they have a bunch of tips on their website to get you started. It's ready.dc.gov/NPM2024. One of the best ways to prepare is to make sure you have a way of staying informed, not just by listening to CityCast DC. Sign up for free email or text alerts from district officials on weather, traffic, public safety, and more by visiting alert.dc.gov. Another tip, build your emergency kit over time. Purchase one extra item each time you shop. A checklist is available at ready.dc.gov/kit. Take time now to prepare, because later is too late. Everything you need is at ready.dc.gov.
If your business needs a new application, then developers will have to write code. A lot of code. If an application needs to be modernized, then you'll need time, resources, and caffeine. If this sounds daunting, then use Watson X Code Assistant. Built with IBM's Granite code model, it's AI designed to multiply developer productivity so you can generate code quickly. Learn more at ibm.com/codeassistant. IBM, let's create.
So why in the world does Hugo, a quiet postal clerk, keep getting married? Based on a true story, the 22-plus Weddings of Hugo Multiplay is a raucous tale of a beautiful crime that delves into several hidden themes of our day, from empathy and immigration to love in times of hatred and the universal need to find refuge in a place, person, or a feeling. 22 Weddings is a lot. I definitely want to know what Hugo is thinking. The play premieres at Gala Theater in Spanish with English surtitles. It runs from September 5th to 29th. Learn more and get your tickets at galatheater.org. That's GALATHEATRE.org.
So this relationship officially ends in January. Do you have any sense of what changes immediately?
Yeah, so the shelter will no longer be on New York Avenue, will no longer be managed by the HRA. Now, who will manage it starting in January is unclear. DC Health will assume responsibility for that shelter. What they're trying to do is contract that responsibility out to another provider or potentially the HRA again before January. So this is going to be like a 3-month process to try and bid out a new contract to run the shelter. Again, a lot of other things are up in the air. HRA is going to continue managing the shelter that it operates on Oglethorpe Street and Northwest. That's not going to change. But as far as who you call for certain services, that really is to be determined. So we're going to have to watch and see who ultimately receives these contracts for services because it's all on the table.
So you've reported that some of these services will be handled in-house on a continuing basis. Some might be contracted out. I know it might be a bit of a wait-and-see situation, but are there any specific services that you can say, like, oh, that's going to be contracted out probably?
Yes, so the management running the shelter, for sure, the city is really urgently looking to contract that out. They're also looking to solicit bids for an emergency expansion of that New York Avenue shelter because there are some serious concerns about capacity related to this change. And I'll explain that now. So currently, animals that are sent to the New York Avenue shelter, there's a portion of them that are transferred to the Oglethorpe facility for adoption. It's unclear if that's going to continue to happen in January because this partnership is changing. So if the city can no longer take some of these animals to Oglethorpe, that means they're going to be at the New York Avenue shelter, and there were already concerns about capacity there. So they are looking at a way to build basically emergency expansions to the shelter ahead of January to try to mitigate this capacity problem, but that's going to be a real concern. Other services that will likely be contracted out are going to be some of these other animal control services, some of the veterinary care services. That all is likely going to either go back to HRA or to someone new. We'll see who bids.
So I know that for months, Humane Rescue Alliance has been warning about the problem that you were just describing, this capacity problem with the shelters. Is coming up with some sort of overflow situation, is that going to be how DC Health deals with that persistent problem?
It's going to be one of the ways. I mean, Humane Rescue Alliance is also acutely aware of this concern. Part of it comes from the fact that in DC, there's a lot of housing. We know the city has housing difficulties as far as just getting people into homes, but then to get a pet into those homes is another layer of complication because not everywhere lets you have a dog. So people have to forfeit their animals if they move or they can't get them into the building they want to go, so they put it up for adoption. And especially big dogs over 40 pounds, a lot of housing complexes or apartments don't allow animals that big, so they stay in these shelters way longer than the HRA or the city would like them to. So this emergency expansion will help, but it will not be a full remedy to the problem. So what the HRA is going to do, they see this contract separation or termination as a chance to reallocate their resources toward trying to prevent animals from going into the shelter in the first place, working with pet owners on veterinary care. They're trying to start a mobile clinic. They're expanding into Southeast DC to make sure services and care is more accessible. And the hope is that by doing that, people can, I guess, take care of their pet instead of forfeiting them for medical reasons or behavioral problems, which is what happens now.
Is some of this related to the pandemic where people were stuck in their houses, adopted pets that they were really excited about spending time with because they were working remotely? Now they're back to work in person and it's like, okay, or maybe they have to move and it's like, okay, what am I going to do with this animal that I adopted?
100%. During the pandemic, you saw this surge of people adopting pets. Many folks, if they had the privilege to do so, were stuck at home, working at home. So it's a good time to introduce a pet into your home because you can be there, especially a dog that needs supervision, you're there. But as things open back up, people started going back to the office, traveling more, or had to move, as you mentioned. Now it's a matter of, okay, can I actually continue to take care of this animal? So you have seen the trend change a bit more toward people forfeiting their animals and those adoptions slowing down.
So how does this contract dispute affect your average Washingtonian who just wants to adopt a pet or needs to provide care for an animal in their life?
You know, that's the exact question I sought out to ask when I was working on this piece. And the truth is, these services, the ones that we've talked about as far as animal care, the dangerous animal control, getting veterinary care for shelter animals, being able to adopt, all of these services are going to continue. It's just a matter of, is HRA going to perform them through their nonprofit, which just because this contract with DC is ending does not mean HRA is going to stop being a source to adopt animals or working with the city on animal-related issues. It's just not going to be quite the same. So what's going to change practically is probably the phone number you call for certain animal control-related services. And the truth is, people are likely going to be able to choose between the city / whoever they bid out some of these services to and the HRA for the same services. You can just kind of go to who you want to go to because the HRA, through its nonprofit mission, will continue doing a lot of this stuff. The city separately will be contracting it out, and it might be a little bit confusing at first, but the most important thing I think to remember is that these services will not stop. They will continue.
That's good to mention for folks listening, like, oh no, what am I going to do?
Right. You know, I think this has been alarming to people for a number of reasons. One, I think the narrative that was out there first when this story came out was that DC government was going to be absorbing all of these animal care and control responsibilities that HRA has been handling for decades. And that's not quite true. Some of the services are going in-house to DC Health, like the handling of dangerous dogs that I mentioned. However, the whole other suite of services will be bid out, and it's possible that the Humane Rescue Alliance will apply for those bids and they might win them again. It remains to be seen what they do, but this is not a situation where the city government is taking on a bunch of new responsibilities, which I think concerned a lot of people, particularly those who care about the welfare of animals, knowing that our government can be a little bit slow and certainly has its share of issues. And I think, to be honest, DC Health is pretty clear-eyed that they do not have the budget, staff, or capacity to absorb all of this responsibility. But they're working with an extremely tight timeline to bid out these services ahead of January. It's like 3 months. So I think it's going to be something to watch for sure.
Well, thank you so much for breaking it all down, and thanks for being here, Michael.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, share it with a pet owner in your life. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.